Let's head to the Uncommon Grounds Coffee House in Saratoga Springs, New York, where a conversation is brewing with our own environmental journalist, Dale Willman. Let's listen in.
So Mercury, health officials are expressing concern especially about coal-fired power plants and the mercury that they're emitting and the problems this is creating in waterways. Right. Businesses, though, say that it's too expensive to really get rid of. How big a problem is mercury anyway?
Well, it's a pretty big problem in the Adirondacks, especially because we have both an acid rain and the mercury coming out of the sky at the same time. Acid rain tends to make mercury contamination worse by converting some of the inorganic mercury in the ecosystem into organic form that can be easily absorbed by living tissue.
Is that what they call methyl mercury?
It is.
And I've read a lot about that being retained in the fatty tissues of fish, and in particular freshwater fish.
The level of contamination in the fish has a lot to do with what kind of fish it is. The top predators in the water tend to have a lot more mercury in them than fish that eat plants, for example, because there's very little mercury in the plants, but a lot in the fish that are feeding off the bottom, which get eaten by larger fish, and then still larger fish. So you wind up with some of the fish that are most popular for people to eat, bass, perch, pike, tend to have the highest levels of mercury in them because of the fact that they've been eating all these other species their entire lives. It's not that they're living in water that's so profoundly contaminated by mercury, it's that a little bit of mercury accumulates and you never get rid of it.
So I want to go out and have fish. Fish is a good thing to have in my diet. There's omega-3 acids, there's all sorts of things that are beneficial to me from a health perspective, but what does that say then about the kind of fish I should be eating?
If you were to eat trout and salmon from fresh water, you'd be better off than eating some of the bigger fish that are eating the other fish. The younger the fish is, it tends to be less likely that you'll see a lot of mercury in the fish. The smaller the fish is. As strange as that might seem, in the Adirondacks we're seeing that most of the big predator fish in most of the lakes have some kind of mercury in them. And it's been advised by the state that adult males can eat half a pound a month and not worry about the health effects, but that women of childbearing age and children and the elderly really ought to pay attention to how much they're consuming because it can have pretty serious effects on their health.
So I should be looking at younger fish and fish further down the food chain?
Yeah.
John, I just have to say, most of the studies that I've looked at indicate that actually Americans eat very little fish, 4 ounces a week on average, and 6 ounces is what they're saying is safe to eat. Right. So we don't really have an issue right now. And I'm not sure why we're making it an issue.
It affects more than just people, too. If you take a look at the populations of birds and mammals that live on fish besides people, we're not the only ones to be concerned about here. I think we'd really love to see...
Let's assume that we actually care more about the human beings involved in this ecosystem, whether that be economics or ecology.
Right.
Let's assume for a minute that the native populations, that the populations in the Adirondacks, that people who live in other countries that eat 10, 15 times the amount of fish that we do, that they have a right to eat fish. And if we have polluted them to the extent that it's hurting people to eat that mercury, they should be dying. In Japan and Iceland, they eat 10 and 15 times more fish than we do. They live longer than we do.
Yeah, well, there are other reasons for that too, I think, that they don't have the same kind of cultural influences that we have here.
You saying they don't have McDonald's in Iceland?
They don't go twice a week, that's for sure. You know, we'd like to see legislation on the federal level that would essentially cut the amount of mercury coming out of power plants, to not only to help protect human health, but to try and protect the environment at the same time.
But the big argument on that is the economic impact of that. And the coal companies are saying that it's just too prohibitive and the technology isn't there.
But there are some ways to try and control it, too. There are some on-the-factory kind of add-ons to smokestacks and to the boiling system on most power plants that could be investments that were made relatively cheaply that would help this problem.
Guys, one thing I'm thinking right here is we're talking about mercury in fish. And what we're really talking about on a broader level is water pollution. Why don't we focus on water pollution?
That's a good point, Matt. There are so many things in our waterways today, from pharmaceuticals to the chemicals we produce, even the mercury that we're talking about. So it's a good topic. Maybe it's something we should talk about next week. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.